So I was like,
I got nothing. I got nothing
I
after
know.
that.
I mean, thanks, buddy. You know, with friends like you, just passing off your axe murdering secretaries. So anyway, well, guys, thank you for being on. So welcome to BeerNet Radio. Guys, this is the podcast where all your dreams come true. We've got JB Shireman here from Arlington Capital, and we've got Dave Williams and Bump Williams from Bump Williams Consulting. We got people in Colorado, we've got people in Connecticut, we've got people in Texas. We're everywhere you want to be. Bump, you seem distracted, like you're writing stuff and jacking with shit. Yeah, eating snacks, of course.
Lunch.
You know, let's first just talk about some data. And I don't know if I need to pull up Jen's questions actually, but before we get into that, you know, Bump and Dave, last time, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about how new innovations, the vast majority of them don't really last past year two. Is there any update on that you guys are seeing in the data? Is that still true, or are innovations sticking more, or what's your opinion on that?
I think it really is hit or miss, to the point where we do see some that have stuck around in year one, year two, and actually built themselves into a longer term brand. But there's other pockets of the category where it's still very much lasts year one, and then they already have something backfilling at year two that almost cuts its legs out from under it before it even has a chance to start cycling, or trying to get ahead of that inevitable sophomore slump. So it really is all over the place. You know, you look at certain segments like the FMB world right now, half of the growth, the dollar gains to date, are all from new brands, but the other half are all from existing or year two or three brands. So it is really kind of a mixed bag on that innovation side.
Right. Yeah, it is so hard to come out with a new brand these days. And you almost have to test it DTC first just to see if it's got legs, or, you know, you either got to build it or buy it.
The point on the innovation, just real quick, it's not going to go away, right? It's not going to go away because the consumer wants it. And we have this massive convergence of the non-alcoholic guys and the alcoholic guys. And now is it malt-based or spirits-based or wine-based or hemp-based or CBD or cannabis or whatever. So I think this innovation is going to continue to pound on us and cause challenges. And not to contradict you, Harry, but it's really easy to create a brand. It's really hard to create a brand that sticks. So the
precisely
fairly low, you know, where you get somebody else to contract for you some, and you get a chain placement and try it out, you know, but it's going to be a complexity that we all have to wrestle with.
Right.
Hey, Harry, on this innovation question though, I looked at it in like two different ways. There are some retailers that have a lot better breadth and depth, a lot more shelf space to have a wider variety and assortment. And sometimes innovation gets lost in there because they don't merchandise it properly or whatever the case may be. It just fails. There are manufacturers who just don't give it enough time to take hold. They have high expectations, or maybe there's distributor pressures. I got to come out with a variety pack, and because that's easy to sell. They just don't get it. In my opinion, the smaller format stores, especially convenience stores, where consumers know exactly what they want to get. There's not a whole lot of variety and assortment. So when a new product hits and a distributor is focused on execution and knowing that this is the neighborhood, this is the store, this is the price point, this is who my demo profile is. When they get that product in the store and on the shelf, there's a lot better success rate for what I'll call innovation that way. But a lot of these stores, they're just too big. They look at small margins, they look at quick turns, and they look at big volume numbers, and they don't give innovation time to really take root. So that's why we're seeing a shelf life or life cycle of 12 to 18 months. They just launch it and pull it. And that's a shame, because there's a lot of good brands, I'm sure, out there that, given more time, they would have been successful.
Yeah. Speaking of velocity and space, we're going into fall resets, and we've had a summer like nobody would have ever expected, just black swans after black swans. And there's a lot of people out there that have always said that AB was overshelved, was overspaced because they have too many packages. And I think there's people smell blood in the water for picking off some of those smaller moving Bud Light packages. And what are you guys hearing about what retailers are saying about the fall reset? Is AB, how much are they going to lose, and who does it go to?
All right. We just finished a huge shelf set study. It's not published yet, Harry. I'm putting on the finishing touches now, but I'm going to answer that in three ways because there's never a single answer. Number one is the beer category obviously isn't going to be getting more shelf space. Those 100 linear foot sections, they're stuck. I can't add new cooler doors in a convenience store. I just can't do that. So the beer category in and of itself is going to be right where it is today. It's going to be there tomorrow. Beer category is going to stay the same in spite of some states changing laws that allow spirits to be sold where malt-based beverages are. We're holding our own. That's number one. Number two, and I'm going to save the whole Bud Light situation to the end. David, you can put the shock collar on me and shut me up when I go off the deep end here, but I am going to go colorful on this one. I'm going to save that one for the very end.
Saddle up, folks. Buckle up. Here he goes.
This is the calm. This is obviously Mexican imports are going to win this year. They've already started. Retailers want to save what's left of the summer, so they've already expanded facings and display space. People always forget to include display space as part of days of supply, but not just in the beer aisle, secondary, tertiary, outside the beer aisle displays. Mexican imports will win. David mentioned this one earlier. Flavors are going to win. There's no doubt about that. Number three, it's going to be small gains, but it'll be what I'll call the non-alcoholic piece, probably led by 0.0 and Athletic primarily. Those are the two, I think, biggest winners out there. And then the third one is going to be, when I say spirits-based RTDs, I really mean High Noon. High Noon is the biggest player, and they continue to widen the gap between themselves and everybody else out there. And I think retailers are up to here with all these promises of brand new spirits-based RTDs being the next coming of Christ. Those days are done. David ran a forecast model on RTD, spirits-based RTD category, and that will soon be coming to a halt. I think David had 25 as the year it goes down to flat or low single digit.
Yeah, around that.
All right, so
that's
they're not
assuming no laws change in the meantime. That's a big caveat to throw in there, but
right.
Even if they do change, David, I think that the retailers and the stores and the consumers in the markets where you can't sell spirits with beer or malt-based products, they're still buying spirits and are getting tired. They're selling down with the High Noons of the world. Neutral's all right. Neutral's doing okay. Monaco, Beatbox is still doing very well. Buzzballs does well, but everybody else is just simply, it's hard seltzer water all over again, and it's going to come to an end relatively quickly, probably within the next 24 months. It'll come to a screeching halt. That's the second bucket, Harry.
Yeah.
And then if I didn't mention single serve as who's going to be getting more space, single serves will, simply because of price point, higher ABVs, and these 12-pack pricing anymore, they're just not a value for consumers. They're not. But I can buy a high ABV 19.2 or 24, 25 ounce malt liquor. I can buy a Pabst Blue Ribbon. I can buy some great local brands at a single serve and still get my money's worth. They're going to get more shelf space.
Right.
Now let's talk about premium. This is what everybody's been asking about. Of our 132 retailers, 99.9% of them said, I am not cutting premium space in the fall. I'm not going to do that because it was my number one selling segment. Imports is now past it, by the way. Imports is the largest dollar contributor across beer year to date. I'm not going to cut my domestic premium section. However, I am going to start reallocating shelf space within that premium segment. So Miller's getting more. Coors is getting more. Yuengling, where it's available, is going to be getting more. The Pabst brands are going to be getting more. We're going to start reallocating that shelf space, and it's going to come. from the InBev portfolio. That's where it's going to come from. It's going to come primarily from Bud Light. We're going to see some residual maybe into Budweiser. We've seen some negative halo effects with the Busch brand family and the Natty brand family. And my biggest worry is that goose that's laid the golden egg since what, 2001, 2002, Mick Ultra. I don't think that's going to lose any shelf space at all. Mick Ultra still seems to be pretty well insulated, but Bud Light is going to get hurt. But it's more than that. David, turn the shot collar up, okay? Because here it comes. Losing shelf space, InBev said, hey, listen, we think we've been underspaced forever. So maybe things are going to come back to where they should be. I got to call, I got to throw a flag on that one. Category management, the advisors, the category captains of the world, you're telling me that they've allowed brands like Bud Light, which was the number one up until 2 weeks ago, still is the number one volume brand, but it's now the number $2 brand, that they've allowed it to be underspaced. I call nonsense on that one. It's always, in my opinion, been overspaced. And now retailers are going to say, we're making changes to that one. We're going to start dropping it back. All the money that's go ahead.
And do you think that AB is in danger of actually losing some of the category captainships?
That's the ripple effect, Harry. You are, as usual, way ahead of the game. That's the ripple effect. It's already happened. This summer, AB has already been told, you're no longer our category captain. We're going to give it to Constellation. We're going to give it to this other brewer. It's already happened. That's the ripple effect. Yeah. So when you think about not just losing shelf space, you're losing cooler door space. You're going to lose a whole cooler door. You're going to lose display space because why should I put a tri-brewer ad up there when only 2 of the 3 are selling? You're going to lose category captaincies. You're going to lose category advisor spots. And as strong as the AB, as the InBev, AB is the distributor network. InBev owns the company now. As strong as the InBev category or national retail sales teams are, how do you go in and tell a retailer, don't readjust the shelves? Don't have a knee-jerk reaction and readjust the shelves because we're down 26%. Don't readjust that. Retailers are going to say, are you in this for you or for me? And so the retailers are now saying, we're going to go outside. We're going to start taking this upon ourselves. It's already happened in C stores. It's going to happen in big, large format stores. It won't happen in the fall in the large format grocery. It won't, because they're going to wait to see how things net out at the end of this year. But come spring, I'm telling you, if things don't turn around for the InBev portfolio, you're going to see massive shifts in share and items being discontinued, duplicate items in different packages, glass, aluminum, can, obviously. You're going to see it happen. And I feel if it weren't for the strength of the AB distributors, leveraging their relationships, leveraging their long-term workers out there that every single day we're part of the PTA, we're part of the Little League, we're part of that committee that always raises money for local charities. If it wasn't for the AB distributor, not InBev, InBev has been deplorable on what they've done, or really what they haven't done. But the strength of the AB distributor network has kept this brand from further hemorrhaging than what it already has. And that's there's going to be a big ripple effect coming down. And if InBev's strategy is to wait until April of next year to see what happens where things level out, I don't think they're going to be in for a good news story. I think that this Miller Coors and Yuengling and Pabst taking on all these lost Bud Light shoppers, it's not going to end on April 1st. They don't know there's a clock in place. There's a big wave of growth coming for Molson Coors, for Pabst, for Yuengling. It's going to continue to go because consumers, once they leave a brand, it is so hard to come back, and they've got the momentum right now. My only question mark, as do the retailers, is will Molson Coors be able to meet the demand of the consumers' increase purchase occasion of that Molson Coors portfolio, whether it's Coors Banquet, whether it's Keystone, whether it's Miller Lite, whether it's Miller High Life. All those brands are in double-digit growth mode. And if I'm a retailer, that's my big question to Molson Coors is, can you meet this increased demand? Because it's not going to stop come April 1st next year, it's going to continue to build because they've got momentum. So
Right.
that's my
Well,
three
I mean,
points on that question,
So
man.
just one comment on that, Harry, because it's a good segue because you were kind of ending Bump on the demand and the want of the consumers. I don't disagree with anything that Bump said there at all. But if you think about this, the guy or gal who's category captain, their general nature is going to say they want more. They're the captain. They got the chance to grab the ring. Why wouldn't they? The guy who doesn't have it or gal who doesn't have it's going to be like, oh, they're in charge. We're not getting enough. That's going to ebb and flow. Truthfully, who ultimately decides this, and you're going to get sick of hearing me say this, those retailers are going to do exactly what the consumers want them to do. And non-alcoholic beer is exhibit A. How long have we had non-alcoholic beers on the shelf? Long decades. They were nothing until the consumer decided that health and wellness and better for you mattered more. And so I think the consumers are going to continue to demand these things. They're going to continue to drive these demand for different categories, and the retailers and distributors are going to respond.
Right. Good points. Good points all. And the display space too, like, you know, the weekly ads and the weekly rollers, that's kind of where the action is too. And they've already been losing those. We're about to go into Labor Day, and that will be interesting to see who gets on ad there. But, you know, once Labor Day is done, everybody has a little bit of time to regroup. Like you said, fall resets really don't matter that much. It's really the spring resets to get ready for next summer, because all we have is between now and then is the Super Bowl. So, you know, will Molson Coors be able to meet demand?
Yeah, I don't think that Molson Coors is going to drop the ball on this one. Again, we only work with about 400 of distributors across the country, but they do 99% of the volume. We are convinced through our work with those distributors that the Molson Coors distributors that were on board early. They saw what was going to happen, and they put their forecasts in for May, June, July, or they put it in for the second quarter, summer selling season. They're getting all the product that they order. They're getting it. There hasn't been any out of stock at retail. The aggressive, innovative, the Molson Coors distributors that see the future, that understand supply chain and demand modeling, they're okay. The same is true for Constellation, by the way. We haven't seen a lot of out of stocks with them. And in fact, we're seeing their expanded facings, their days of supply, their inventory on display being a huge plus in preventing out of stocks. We're seeing that. And I think that the distributors, the Molson Coors folks that got on board early and saw the opportunity, they took exactly what you said. We're not going to mess this one up. We're going to take advantage of it. We're going to order 60 days inventory instead of 21 or 30. We're going to heavy up. They got all they wanted and they've been in stock. And that has made great retail relationships. So I like that one. The other thing you made a comment on it, and David just ran another analysis on this one, was we have not seen a reduction in merchandising for Bud Light. We look at Bud Light versus Miller Lite versus Coors Light. We'll throw Light Lager from Yuengling in there, but mostly it's the big three. All three brands have been getting great levels of merchandising support through the summer. Displays, feature, TPRs. It's the lift. It's that lift number. What's the retailer getting for that merchandising space? Miller Lite, Coors Light, Banquet, all those Molson Coors brands, their lift numbers are so much higher than the Bud Light numbers that retailers are looking at that and saying, boy, oh boy, I've got to salvage what's left of the summer. I've got to salvage my consumers. I got to increase my market basket. I got to drive loyalty. I'm going to change my merchandising philosophy. But right now, levels of support for all three leading light brands are pretty darn good, in high 90s nationally. They're doing a good job. It's the lift level. That Bud Light shopper isn't coming back to Bud Light. That's what I'd be worried sick about right now.
Right. Good point. And that leads us to the next subject, which is pricing. We took 2 price increases last year. The consumer, just went through over a year of really high inflation. It's starting to come down. Where do you see, are we going to see price increases, and who's going to lead? Is it going to be Constellation or Molson?
Okay.
What's going on here?
So David, before I turn it over to you, because I know you're writing the September monthly letter on pricing, price gaps, elasticities. David's addressing that question, Harry, on September letter.
Okay.
I'll just tell you this, is nationally, we have talked in the past with you and written about it, about price sensitivity for the beer shopper versus wine and spirits. We said we've always taken price higher than wine, spirits, and simply CPI. We've done that. There are pockets, and again, when I talk nationally, it's a sum of overdeveloped and underdeveloped marketplaces. But there are pockets within flavors, there are pockets within Mexican imports, and there are certainly pockets within craft. And I thought no one ever thought I'd be saying that have huge opportunities to take price up in October or in the fall this year and make a ton more money. We think that nationally, when you look at, I can only take a 2% price increase, I can take a 2.5%, whatever. That's great nationally. But when I look at the category, I look at segment, Mexican imports, FMBs, craft or local craft or national craft or mainstream craft, certain package, 12-pack, single serve, sixes. There are massive profit making opportunities that exist right now across the country, that if a Molson Coors or if a Constellation or if a Heineken or if a New Belgium does not take price on certain brands, certain styles, certain package types this year, they are walking away from millions of dollars by leaving it on the table. And that's what David's going to be talking about in September letter. So I think Molson should take the lead, by the way. Yeah. I think they should take the lead right now. And I think Constellation should be taking some huge pricing. Huge.
Constellation always seems the most bashful about taking price because they watch that gap with Bud Light. It used to be the gold standard. And now, I agree. Because if Molson Coors takes up pricing, if AB's an idiot if they don't follow, because they're going to sell the same amount of beer anyway. They might as well get the margin.
If they don't, if InBev doesn't take pricing up when Molson Coors does, if Molson Coors does, retailers are going to take them up. Distributors should take them up. Everybody's going to take it up, because once one premium leader goes up, the retailer's going to take them all up to have a single price tier. David, why don't you talk about the price tiers and the price gaps that you've been looking at, that in terms of where import is, where FMBs are versus where premium and below premium are? Because it's a brilliant point you came up with.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we definitely look at is that correlation between once you're crossing certain thresholds or tiers, is there any shift in velocity, slowdown? Is there any flip in the trend? And for certain areas, we just haven't seen that as prices continue to climb. If we look at that gap, Harry, that you mentioned between imports and domestic premium, let's say, that gap has gotten bigger and bigger since 2019. Not to the same leaps that it took from 2020, 2021, but it continues to grow. And as that gap grows, trends for imports haven't really slowed or gotten, velocity impacted to any extent. So when we look at, is there room to take versus where there might be a little less, you look at all those metrics together, and to Bump's point, there are pockets where the sensitivity hasn't quite been hit just yet.
Right.
But the price continues to grow. Average case price, look at 12-pack prices. They're still in that +4%, +5%, +6% range over recent quarters. So they're still taking big leaps. And you kind of wonder about at what point things are going to slow down. And, that's happened in some areas, hasn't happened in others. It's all relative, all market specific, sure. But in the big picture, the national average, I think there is room to play for sure.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And David, talk about 12-pack, because 12-pack really isn't a value package for the consumer anymore. You're paying $20 and change for a 12-pack. It's not a value package, but 15s, 18s, 20s, 24s, I think are going to have a banner year, either back half of this year or next year, because 12-packs, it's no longer a big deal or bargain for consumers anymore.
No, I'm glad you stopped right before 30-pack, because that seems to be something weird going on with the price points for 30s and what's going on with 24s and 18s right now. I think there's a lot of that out-of-pocket expense being considered, the relative gaps between what you used to spend for one size and what it costs you now. And I think that leads into why we're seeing a little bit of shift in traction from premium to below premium. It's a volume per out-of-pocket expense play that we're seeing play out at retail right now. We're seeing, actually, back to displays, seeing an uptick in display activity for the below premium segment, because those are the larger pack sizes that are moving right now, where they might be slowing in other segments of the business.
The 30 packs never made any money. I don't know why they have a 30 pack. It's a stupid package, but it is. It's stupid. There's been some talk of making more smaller packages so that people can still afford to stay in the premium or import segment, kind of like Coke does. At checkout, put an 8-ounce bottle there and see if people pay for that if they can't buy a 12 pack. Anyway.
Well, Harry, to your point, I was looking at some Chicago numbers recently, and I'm seeing it was either 8 packs or 9 packs playing in the premium world now, just to do exactly what you said. 9 pack, 16-ounce cans or whatever it might have been. It was a very unique format, probably to hit a very specific price point for those shoppers.
Right. Probably for one chain.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, hey, JB, I wanted to talk a little bit, switching gears, about the craft world. And craft's had a tough year, really a tough 2 years, although there are bright spots within craft, and we're seeing a lot more M&A. We're seeing a lot of founders get their breweries back from the big brewers. We've seen Japanese brewers be active in acquiring craft beer. Is that going to continue? And what's we're going to see more like craft on craft deals to try and get scale?
Whole bunch of questions there, kind of rolled into one. But
I've got like 5 more, so
it's all good, man. Look, everything is cyclical, right? There was a time when nobody thought craft beer would ever make a 10 share. People used to make fun of it. It's a little basement business and things like that. It's not. It became a real thing. It's a real part of the industry today. It remains a very important part of the beer industry today. But, to every action, there's a reaction. And Jim Cook said it years ago, we were opening at a rate of 2 a day, 2 breweries a day for years and years and years. And I remember Jim saying, we can't continue this way or it'll all be craft. And we know that's not going to happen. So it did have to course correct. As far as, societal trends and how this happened, craft in many ways sort of did this to themselves, and it coincided with the way consumers were trending. And kind of follow with me here, if you will, like a lot of those brand loyal Bud Light type drinkers that was their beer. That's what they drank. That's what they grew up with. They didn't necessarily miss a variety. They didn't need the variety. Whereas this younger consumer grew up with, multiple flavors of vitamin waters and different things out of foil packages and flavors. And all of a sudden craft beer, they come of age, and craft beer gives them all this variety, gives them all these choices, and condition them that you should expect innovation. You should expect new things from your brewery. And it created this very exciting dynamic in the beer industry. And then they took it one step further, where they even diversified the category of IPA itself. And there was hazy in New England and low calorie IPA and imperial IPAs, so they really rode a wave of consumer change that they helped instigate. And then again, like we said before, it's not the weather vane that turns, but the wind. And the winds changed, and seltzers come, and RTDs come, and better for you come. So they now are caught up, like everybody else is, in being part of a total global beverage business. It's changing very quickly. As far as M&A, as it's related to that, M&A is always related to growth. You know what I mean? When there is a real opportunity for growth and robust growth across a lot of channels, and a lot of people think it's critical to their strategy, you got a very robust M&A market. When the growth gets harder to find, when the synergies don't work out the way they think, when the consumers go to other things, and then you combine that with higher interest rates and harder to forecast, which affects people's DCF models and their discount rate, you have a much tougher M&A environment. You could argue rightfully that craft values were overinflated for quite some time. Representative A in the Ballast Point $1 billion deal, and the write-downs that a lot of these people have taken on these things. And then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, what Tilray just paid for a lot of the ABI portfolio. I don't think that ever means that they were worth $3,000 a barrel, or now they're only worth $150 a barrel. That's silly. That's always been worth what it is to the person who's doing the investing. And there will continue to be people like Sapporo who saw a very unique opportunity well beyond the purchase of this iconic craft brand Stone. They saw the ability to brew their beer in LA, to have bi-coastal facilities, to understand more about the US market. It fit with their strategy. So to answer your question, yes, I'm confident that there will be more craft beer M&A, and they will not all be at bargain basement prices. Some of them will. There's a lot of people out there now that would love to sell their business, aren't going to be able to, but there will be strategic and thoughtful M&A still to come. And to answer one of your other questions, I think some of that will look like craft on craft. And that's different than a PE guy trying to roll up a bunch of crafts, because the PE guy's got to have their exit. These guys are looking at it longevity. And, to use a gross analogy, sometimes it's two sick dogs in a kennel together and hope they're going to heal one another. Those generally don't work. There are very thoughtful and creative partnerships and consortiums that can be done with craft beers. Some have happened, some are being talked about today, and I'm confident that they'll come to fruition over time. We're smack in the middle of several of them. It's really interesting. They're thinking about it the right way, I think. There's still a real opportunity there as craft evolves as part of total global beverage.
Right. Okay. All right. You talked about opening 2 breweries a day, and that was unsustainable. Now we're just opening 1 brewery a day. I mean, there are still people opening breweries. One a day. I don't know what they're doing, but
it's interesting. Think about this though. Like prior to COVID, a lot of the big national craft brands were struggling, New Belgium included. Voodoo hadn't really taken off the way that it did, and kind of the darlings of the industry were all these little nano breweries. They were vertically integrated. They could sell beer to go. They're capturing all their margin. They don't have to go very far. There were a lot of great things about it. COVID turned that whole thing on its head. It just crushed that momentum of those little guys. Grocery stores remained open. What was the only craft beer you could get was people that had good chain presence and large pack sizes. And it really changed that dynamic. Now, as beverage continues to evolve, it becomes more of a scale game as the non-alcoholic players come into it and the big get bigger and the scale gets larger. I think you have this wider bifurcation, and I'm pretty bullish on a lot of these small local breweries to do quite well. They just got to know what they're going to be and what they're not going to be. And I think if you can just keep that truly local and have a diversified portfolio of beverages and have a great family friendly place and a good location, food trucks coming, so you're not in the restaurant business, I think they can have a nice little healthy business on their hands. And I think there'll be quite a few of them that make it just fine. But the soft middle, as we used to say, has gotten broader. And a lot of those people, I'm afraid, are in for very challenging times.
Yeah. And JB, I'm going to add, that was great. That was absolutely great. Add on to these small craft brewers that are selling direct to consumer. They're also adding on distilleries. I mean, we have seen an explosion of small craft distilleries out there. In fact, Harry, was anybody from Schuhmacher Enterprises out at the ADI this year in Vegas?
Yeah, I think Sarah was there.
Okay. I mean, she saw probably 3,000 small craft distillers. They're not all going to make it, but the smart craft beer brewers that are adding on distilleries are marketing this whole umbrella of DTC, small, local, high quality, specialty brands, specialty drinks. They're going to do exceptionally well. They are going to do great. And I just look at this growth of spirits, RTDs, spirits in particular. That's where, if I'm a distributor, that's where I'm placing my money. That's where I'm placing my bets.
Right.
Again, Where's the consumer going? The consumer's drinking. Most consumers are drinking total beverage cross category. Yeah. So if you're going to be the local beverage tap house, for lack of a better word, rather than a brew pub, You don't want to lose the battle for lack of shooting back. If the state law allows you to sell a wider variety of alcoholic and total beverages, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
As long as we don't start acting like Canada and limiting ourselves to 2 drinks a week, that's ludicrous.
I'm glad I didn't read that. I like Canadians, but that's just dumb.
Well, it's just a suggestion. I don't think any real Canadians are taking it to heart. But
Yeah.
Let's hope nobody in America copies what Canada's trying to do. That would make the dumb dumber.
that's great points. And one of the things that kind of, I'm jumping around, but going back to spirit RTDs, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like when we talked about vodka for so many years, it was really, we were talking about Tito's. And now when we talk about spirit RTDs, we're talking about High Noon. And it just dominates the space, and it's doing it with one arm behind its back. It's not, in many states it can't be in grocery stores or C-stores. The price point is so much higher because of the excise tax they have to pay on it, and so they're able to do it because it's Gallo and they're brilliant. But I agree. I think that category has real headwinds, and I don't know that it's going to be another hard seltzer like we saw 4 or 3 years ago, with White Claw and Truly. I think it's more like a Tito's situation where we got High Noon and then everybody else.
Yep.
It's funny looking at the space too, because even with all the healthier growing families out there, they're still shedding share to either High Noon or some of the other bigger splashes that have come into the space, carving out their own little slice of the pie too. So growth is great on one side, but you're still losing share in the bigger picture. Right. So that pie isn't getting much bigger like it was in the beginning, and now the slices are getting smaller, and it's going to shake out at some point. I agree.
Well, no, I was just going to say, if I owned a company, a beverage company, and I was growing but losing share, I wonder if I would care. I guess you would, because at some point the category is going to stop growing, and then you're going to continue to lose share, and you're going to, okay, I get it now. It takes me a while.
It's about a share game. Look, in every category, and again, we're the ones that want to put this in categories, and I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind. In every category, there's always a leader. And in new categories, it's generally the people that are there first and have scale, whether it's White Claw or High Noon or whatever. But again, look at this through the mind of the consumer. And consumers prior to seltzer were getting domestic light lager, imports, which were largely light lagers, and craft beers, which were largely IPAs. Not a ton of selection. None of it spoke to better for you. None of it spoke to health and wellness. So seltzer comes along and it checks a bunch of these boxes: innovation, flavor, convenience, variety. They didn't know it was better for you, lower calories, no sugar. So that was the first time that I saw the consumer take something and run with it, because we as an industry gave them something different that they were clamoring for, and we've been missing the point. They got it, and consumers took it, and they made seltzer as large in share as it took craft beer roughly 30 years to get to. Now, this is going to be a stretch for a lot of people, but I would argue that seltzers were the original RTD. They were the original, in the consumer's mind. It was ready to drink. It's a replacement for a vodka soda. So all this RTD is a continuing evolution of where the consumer is going and where they want it to be, whether it's malt-based, wine-based, spirits-based, whatever. We're the ones that feel the need to categorize that. Part of this is legally because of taxation issues and where things can be sold and where they can't. But make no mistake, to me, the consumer loves this shit. It is innovative. It's flavorful. They got trademarks that they recognize, whether it was a non-alcoholic brand that they're familiar with or its flavor attributes are better for you. It checks so many boxes for where society is going that I believe that Bump's dad is right. I would never argue data with Bump and Junior, but to say that a certain type of RTD with spirits may plateau in a certain amount of time, I may well agree with that. Where will the whole category of RTDs, and I'm lumping in Twisted Tea, FMBs, seltzer, in the mind of the consumer, it's got a tremendous runway ahead of it. big time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think in a lot of ways, Anthony von Mandel says it when we should just call it the flavor category. It includes everything that's not beer, wine, or spirits. It's anything really in a can that's alcoholic, and
That's
it's
how the
true.
consumer thinks about it.
Right. I mean, Twisted Tea competes with High Noon.
Of course it does.
And we think it's a different consumer and it's a different occasion. We differentiate, but in a lot of ways, they're the same drinker in a lot of ways. So
there was a time that was true, Harry. There was a time where people just drank beer and people just did this. That's not today's consumer, and it's certainly not tomorrow's consumer.
Well, I mean, if you look across beverage alcohol, this flavor in a can, if we want to call it that, is really the fastest thing that's growing and maybe the only thing that's growing in absolute terms. Other adjacent categories have caught on to this, right? And we've got everybody from Dunkin' Donuts to Kentucky Fried Chicken to Pepsi to Monster. I mean, in some ways, it's a good news for beer distributors because where are all these people going to go except for Pepsi to distribute this shit is through beer distributors. On the other hand, if these people act maybe irresponsibly or they get pegged by state AGs, the industry's left holding the bag, and those people would just go back to selling waffles and chicken and energy drinks, and the industry's getting pounded by the TTB or whoever. I mean, what do you guys think about whether this is a good thing or maybe not such a good thing that we're getting all this attention from other CPG companies? Bump, why don't you go start that one?
Yeah, Bump,
Well,
go ahead.
I think back, Harry, to your January summit at the Breakers, and it was JB, myself, and Joe Thompson, right?
Yep.
We were all three on there. And you put up a great chart that looked at beer or brewer market caps. And then you overlaid another chart that took a look at other beverage company market caps that were out there that made InBevs pale in comparison. You looked at PepsiCo, you looked at Coca-Cola, you looked at Amazon, you looked at all these other big companies that made our market cap leaders look like kindergartners in high school.
Peanuts.
Okay?
Kindergartners eating peanuts.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that with the companies great companies like Coca-Cola that have the Simply Success product. They've got the Fresca product with Constellation. They've got Jack and Coke, obviously, with Brown Forman. They have Topo Chico with the Molson Coors system. I think they've done it the right way. Simply Spiked with Molson Coors, Topo Chico with Molson Coors, Fresca. They've done it the right way. They have not upset the apple cart. They've said beer distributors can get to 600,000 stores overnight like that. They've been doing it since 1933. They're the best at it. That's the network. I'm going to feed the hot hand. Brilliant. But I think that the folks at Coca-Cola, they're probably looking at this profit pool, this big money-making machine of beverage alcohol that they really don't compete in. They're dipping a toe in it. They're saying, how do I get a bigger piece of that pie? Because when that Coca-Cola drinker turns 21 and he or she is able to enjoy an alcoholic beverage legally, I want to make sure that Coca-Cola farm team player that I've developed over time, I maintain a share of his or her expenses or their expenditures. I want to make sure I get that. So I personally think we're going to see a lot closer ties, relationships, involvement, investments, partnerships, alliances, acquisitions, which is really JB's area of expertise. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future with beverage companies, not beer, not soft drinks, not NA, not water companies, not milk companies or Yoo-hoo type companies. No, we're going to see the best and the brightest come together, and they're going to run the table. They're going to consolidate trucks. They're going to consolidate route to market. Reyes is a brilliant example of that. They're just a well-oiled machine. Logistically, they're top of the pyramid. Operationally, they're top of the pyramid. They understand the consumer. They understand pricing. They understand forecast modeling. They understand portfolio development. They understand retail relationships and alignment of goals. That's the model for the future. We're going to see a lot more of that, whether it's a U.S.-based company or whether it's somebody outside the U.S. borders. They look at what we have here with our three-tier system, well, especially our middle tier, and say, that's the best route to market. They understand the shopper. They know the neighborhoods. They know the retailers. They get it. That's where I want to put my product.
I mean, but do they think that? I mean,
they do.
But Pepsi created their own distribution network, and I mean, how's that working out for them?
I have not mentioned Pepsi. I have not mentioned Pepsi. I have mentioned Coca-Cola, and by omission, I think it tells you how I feel about that whole PepsiCo initiative.
Well, I mean, has it worked? Junior, do we know have you looked at the numbers on Hard Mountain Dew lately or no?
I have. I took a look earlier today. I think the original assorted pack is struggling a bit now to cycle some numbers. There's some growth coming from some of the offshoots, the single flavors that are offsetting it. So collectively, the family is still doing okay. But I think you're running into a wall when you run out of places to open up and get into, right? When you're going through a certain distribution network. So that's not helping keep the momentum going. There's a big gap between their distribution levels and a lot of their peers in the business, including Monster, Beast Unleashed, playing in a similar, swimming in a similar pool that is going to be tough to overcome.
That's interesting because I feel like Hard Mountain Dew and Beast Unleashed are kind of in the same category.
Yeah.
You know, a non-alc energy type getting into alcohol. And the Beast Unleashed is doing better. Of course, they're national immediately, right? And they're going through the beer network. And so they kind of have a built-in. And, doing this piecemeals, maybe they're in it for a really long slog, or maybe they'll, pull the trigger and switch it over to beer distributors if this doesn't work out.
Either could happen. It could be, if they're playing the long hand, it may seem brilliant in the end. It could be a situation where a leader takes some arrows in the back for getting a little too ambitious too early. To talk about this piece of bump we were just chatting on there, I think you got to zoom back a little bit and think about how fundamentally the industry has changed. It wasn't that long ago, certainly within the 5 years before COVID, it was kind of accepted wisdom that brands were built on premise. How many times have we said that? They're built on premise. That's all bullshit now. It's completely changed. And brands are built in C-store and single serve, big box, grocery. That's where the volume is. So who was already ingrained and who was the leader in those channels? It was the NA guys. Well, when they see all that volume coming through this place that has historically been kind of their turf to own, Bump's exactly right. He hit the nail right on the head. It's this. There's too much opportunity to make money to not put their mitts in it now that the real volume of it has shifted fully in. The vast majority of it is into a system that they dominate, that they understand, and that they're already in there. So I think this is inevitable. It's as predictable as the Eastern sunrise. It is going to happen. Your point, Harry, is they better be careful. And back to your point about the TTB and labeling and how they display things and how they market things, we better be very, very careful about how we do this. And it better be really clear what is in something and what's not, and what's acceptable for someone that's underage and what's not, because it could have ramifications that aren't that great.
Right.
And I think the beer distributors know what the rules of engagement are, and they abide by the rules of engagement because they've got everything to lose. These new distributors coming into play, well, they've been in a world where I can pay for a display, or I can pay for a slot, or I can pay for a facing, or I can pretty much do whatever I want because it's not illegal. And then they come into a new ballpark, a new ball field.
Yeah, and what about Lipton? Has that done anything?
So I've talked to some distributors that have both products in their marketplace. Lipton's not everywhere yet, and it hasn't done very well. There's been some initial trial. I haven't seen a lot of repeat numbers. The distributors that have Lipton the distributors that compete against Lipton don't see a lot of of repeat numbers going on. The loyalty card data we get from retailers, probably not where anybody wants it to be. So,
right. Well, I mean, that's
David and I were chatting about this, about Twisted Tea, before we got on the call in the tea category. You know, people forget, man. First off, Boston Beer is brilliant. One of the best executors, best relationships, best sales people, high integrity. I think this started as a thing called Bodine's when Joe Whitney was still there. I mean, they've been doing this a long, long, long time. And they kind of just flew under the radar with this thing, making a pile of money, not having to really do much advertising at all. And again, back to these winds of change. Now the winds of change caught up with them, and that wind's at their back now. And they already had a great product, well-branded, well-oiled machine, set up to do innovation easily. I mean, they're going to be very, very hard to dethrone, much less even effectively compete against. I should say that the other way around. It'd be hard to effectively compete against them, and I don't see anybody dethroning them.
And that was my final question is, why, it's kind of the Michelob Ultra effect.
Yeah.
Why can't anybody, where's the number 2? Who is the number 2?
Everybody's been talking about Modelo Especial. It's on fire. It's now the number $1 brand year to date in the off-premise trade channels. Everybody knows that. But what's the number 1 brand that's driven the most incremental dollar sales on a year-to-date basis in the off-premise arena? Is it Modelo Especial? No. What is it?
The Twisted Tea mix pack is the number 1 growth SKU for beer year to date, all outlets, outpacing Modelo 12-pack cans, which is up there, but it's number 2 behind Twisted Tea. So it's got that magic behind it. It's got a loyal consumer. It's been doing it for years. It's ingrained almost in that tea space. It's the Kleenex of hard teas. Like it's just synonymous, and it's tough for anybody to change that. There's successful brands out there, but steps way down below what Twisted Tea is bringing to the table. For beer, for hard tea, just in general, it's
starting to show up on premise. And shit, it's got like 250 calories. It just defies everything that we've been talking about health and wellness. But there are those indulgent times that you want to indulge. It's a good product.
The taste has been good since day one. The taste has been phenomenal. They haven't touched the taste, right? Every demographic box you can think of: male, female, large family, small family, ethnicities, education, income. It checks every single box. If I put a matrix up there, a 9x9, 81 box matrix of demographic it checks every single one of them. It appeals to everybody. And I tell you, we look at retailer data, and retailers have 3 metrics they look at for more shelf space, more display space, cooler space. Is it bringing more shoppers in my store? Twisted Tea. Yep. Hey, the shoppers that are buying Twisted Tea, are they buying it more than once a week? Yep, check it off. Hey, when they come in, are they just buying a single serve? Nope. They're buying 12-pack variety packs. They're buying single serves. They're buying glass. They're buying cake. Check, check, check. They're a juggernaut that cannot be stopped. They just can't. And that's when David threw that number out at me about, I think you asked me, hey, what's the number 1 brand generating the most incremental today? I said, Modelo Especial. He goes, well, you're in second place again. Number 1 Twisted Tea variety pack. I said, you're fired.
Man. What about Oro? Speaking of Mick Ultra, nobody winning. Has Oro done anything? I know it's done well, but
what it hasn't done is it hasn't slowed down Especial. So I'd say that's a success in and of itself. That it's just been incremental to the family, much like the Cheladas have been along the way. So it's successful in that sense, and it's got some scale to it. They're starting to, at least.
Yeah.
Distributors were great on that one. They got incremental facings. They didn't rob the Constellation portfolio. They didn't rob facings from itself. They got incremental facings, and they got displays. It was great. Right. Great execution. Phenomenal execution.
Good Lord, we're at an hour, so I better wrap this up. But I wanted to talk before we leave. On the last podcast that we all had together, Bump, you and me and JB talked a little bit about you guys working together, and I know y'all been kind of developing your concepts. So tell me what plans do you guys have, and what value are you going to be adding to beer distributors?
Look, I appreciate it, man. First off, Bump and I have been friends, fly fishing buddies business partners, affiliates, whatever you want to call it, for a really, really long time. Whether I was at New Belgium or whether I was at First Beverage or whether I was at Arlington, whenever I have a question or a client has a question about data analytics or retailer trends, they're my first and only call. And so we continue to work with the Bump Williams Company in that capacity. But Bump and I were trying to find ways to truly work together and formalize a partnership, you know, where we were still doing M&A, he's still doing his retailer thing, but it's like, you know, let's look at this distributor tier. And based on all the things that we've been talking about on this call and the convergence and the scale and the coming of the non-alcoholic players and the focus on these beer distributorships, absent the Bud Light situation, even prior to that, we felt like there was a tremendous opportunity to serve the middle tier, not only through consulting services that we can offer, through Arlington Capital as licensed brokers, we can raise capital to clean up cap tables, brand acquisitions. We can represent buyers, we can represent sellers, we can do all of that. So we formalized a venture to do that together. And I think what makes us different, look, there's a lot of wonderful brokers out there doing a ton of deals very successfully, and I take nothing away from them. We do come at it a little bit differently, having been on the supplier side, been through changes when my brand's being moved about, and now there's more complexities with where does Constellation go and where do all these NA brands go, and there's overlapping footprints and who's going to approve and not approve. What brands do you bet on in the future? The retail analytics and insights that Bump brings to this, combined with our relationships and sort of expertise around the space, we think we can bring something that is new and additive to the distribution of M&A and consulting footprint. And we're getting after it. We're really just cranking it up. We have one deal already done and closed. We were on the Donawall deal that was done. We have a couple of others in the hopper, and we're headed out to MBWA for some other meetings. And like I said, it's not all about, hey, hire us to sell your company. It's hire us to help you. Do you want to double down? Do you want to diversify your portfolio? Do you want to, whatever you need to do between Bump's company and our capabilities at Arlington, we can literally do it all.
Right. One-stop shopping. I got it.
One-stop shopping.
You know, I want to point out that when you started talking, you mentioned that you and Bump had been on a lot of fly fishing trips and whatnot. And I just want to point out that I've only been invited on one fly fishing trip, and then I was never invited back. Now, I know that my behavior might have been reprehensible, but I seem to remember taking a day off and bathing and maybe chasing some goats. And
Harry, I just thought you were letting me catch all the fish in the boat that day, so I appreciated very much what you did.
Look, in front of all the viewers, of the world famous BeerNet Radio, Harry, I am officially inviting you and Bump and David to come to my ranch in Western Colorado. My boat's sitting right there in the driveway. The river's right over there. You are formally invited in front of your full viewership. Come fly fishing with. Want you to come.
I will come. I will.
Hey.
Listen, get me out of this heat anytime.
That's my boy.
It is miserable.
Montana still has a ban on Harry coming back into their waters because when you fell in.
Montana. Nobody needs Montana.
Hey, when Harry fell off the boat, slipped and fell into the water several times. Something about polluting the naturally clean waters with alcohol to keep back the honest. But
we had a good time though, didn't we?
Oh, I look at those pictures all the time. Yeah.
They're
great.
It was good fun. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on BeerNet Radio. I sure do appreciate it. This episode of Beer Business Daily's BeerNet Radio is brought to you by the Beer, Wine, and Spirit Summit. Coming up in January. I don't have the dates, but I'll put them right here. It's late January. We're doing it at the Hotel Del Coronado. I don't know if you're familiar with this place, gentlemen. Some people just call it the Del. It's near San Diego, California, and the weather will be perfecto. And we're going to have receptions out on the beach, and there's going to be music, and there's going to be cigar rollers and dancing and blah, 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 bing. So come bring your significant other and let's have a good time. All right, guys. Well, have a great rest of the week and appreciate it. We'll shout at you later down the road.
Cheers, gang.
Thanks,
Adios.
Eric.
See ya.